In the autumn of 1971, a forest ranger named Elias Warren walked out of the Ozark backcountry dragging a steel trap behind him through the mud. Inside that trap was something alive. Two sheriff's deputies met him at the Pruitt Hollow Ranger Station just after dark, and for the rest of their lives both men swore the thing in the cage was not any animal they could put a name to. They said it was wearing a face they recognized. They said it spoke to them, and they said Warren would not stop repeating what it had told him. 11 days after that, the cage sat empty on the station floor. The capture report had been pulled out of the county filing system, and Elias Warren had disappeared out of a locked back room with a deputy sitting 6 feet from the only door. This is the story of the last man who caught the skin changer of the Ozarks alive, what he said in those final days, and why every single trace of the capture was scrubbed out of the record inside of 1 week. To understand how strange this is, you have to understand who Elias Warren was, because he was not the kind of man who told stories. He had worked the same stretch of national forest for 19 years. He filed his paperwork in the same careful hand every single week. His logbooks from the 1960s still exist, sitting in a private collection today, and they are almost boring in their precision. Weather, trail conditions, deer counts, water station levels noted down to the hour he refilled them. A man that exact is not a man who wakes up one morning and invents a monster. But starting in the summer of 1971, Warren's logbook changes. The handwriting stays neat. The content does not. He begins recording things that have no business in a ranger's field notes. Livestock found dead in the pasture with no blood and no wounds. A trapper's cabin up on the ridge where every mirror had been turned to face the wall. And over, in different corners of his patrol, the same detail carried in from the local families. Someone in the hollow had come home wearing the wrong walk. That phrase, the wrong walk, shows up 4 separate times in his notes, and the people in those valleys were not saying a stranger had appeared. They were saying someone they knew, a husband, a brother, a grown son, had come back through the door looking exactly right and moving exactly wrong. The voice was correct, the face was correct, but the way the body carried itself was off by a fraction of an inch, and the dogs would not go near it. They would back into a corner, and they would not stop growling until it left. The old families of the Ozark uplands had a word for this that predates the county, predates the state, predates the maps entirely. They did not call it a werewolf. They did not call it a demon. They called it a skinwalker, or in the older Scots, Irish settlements deeper in the hills, simply the one who comes home. And the rule was always the same, passed down mother to daughter for 150 years. You do not let it finish a full night under your roof, because whatever wears the skin one night owns the memory by morning, and after that you cannot tell the difference, and neither can it. Warren spent that whole summer chasing the pattern across 60 square miles of ridge and hollow, and by September he had done something no one in the region had managed in living memory. He had figured out where the thing denned during the daylight hours. He built a trap around that den, a steel spring trap meant for a bear, baited with something he never wrote down. The last entry before the capture is a single underlined line that reads only, "Tonight or never." He did not explain what had changed his mind, or what he finally used for bait, or why he went in alone against every rule the service had, and on the night of October the 9th, he caught it. And before we go further, I need to pause for a second, because what I am about to tell you gets significantly darker. And I realized a while ago that some of this cannot be fully explained in a video format. The complete reconstruction of the vanished field account of the man who caught it alive, the ranger's own name, and the exact date and hour of the capture, the coordinates of the windowless room where the creature was held, the full transcript of what he told the sheriff word for word, I put it all into a written document. It is linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. Now let us continue. What happened at the ranger station that first night is where the official story and the surviving witness accounts split clean apart. According to the 2 deputies, Rayburn and Coyle, Warren arrived at the station agitated but completely lucid. He would not let either of them near the cage without heavy gloves, and he would not let them stand in front of it. He kept saying one thing over the radio on the drive in, and then he kept saying it at the station, again and again. Do not let it see your face for more than a moment. It only needs a moment. Deputy Coyle looked into the cage anyway. Of course he did. And this is the detail that Coyle repeated in 3 separate interviews across the next 40 years, right up until his death in 2009, without ever once changing a word of it. He said the thing inside the cage had no fixed face when he first looked at it. He said the features moved, slow and searching, the way water finds the low ground in a field. And then it settled. It settled into the face of Coyle's own younger brother, who had drowned in the Buffalo River 11 years earlier, and whose body had never been recovered from the water. Coyle said the thing smiled at him with his brother's mouth and said his brother's childhood nickname for him, a name that 2 dead people and Coyle himself were the only ones ever to have known. Coyle walked outside and was sick in the gravel and did not sleep for a solid week. Rayburn, the second deputy, never once looked directly into the cage. He said later that was the only reason he stayed sane, but he described the sound the thing made whenever Warren stepped out of the room. A low, patient murmuring, he said, like a man alone in a car practicing lines for a speech, and every so often it would land on a voice that Rayburn knew. His mother, dead 6 years, a schoolteacher from his boyhood. It was not calling out to him, it was rehearsing. It was trying the voices on, one after another, keeping the ones that fit and setting them aside for later use. Rayburn kept his eyes fixed on the floor and one hand near the door for the entire 11 days, and to the day he died he counted himself the lucky one of the 2 men. Now, here is where this stops being a simple campfire story and starts being something with a shape to it. Warren, being the meticulous man he was, did the one thing that would eventually get everything erased. He started documenting the capture as an official incident. He typed a report on the station machine. He assigned it a formal case number. He requested that a specialist be brought in from the state office, and he did it through the proper channels, on paper, with carbon copies filed in 2 separate drawers. He also did one thing the deputies only came to understand much later. He mailed a 3rd copy to himself, to a post office box he rented in the next town over, before the state specialist ever arrived. That copy, if it was ever delivered, has never once surfaced. The box was quietly closed by the Postal Service the same year the station came off the maps, and that paper trail is exactly where the deletion begins. The original report, according to the county clerk's own index that still survives to this day, was assigned a number and logged into the system on October the 10th. By October the 17th, 1 week later, the physical file was simply gone from the drawer, but the index entry remained. A single typed line pointing at an empty space where a document used to be, and that line is the only reason we know for certain the report ever existed at all. Somebody removed the contents and forgot the ledger. Sit with that, because this is the exact signature you find over and over again in suppressed regional history, in these hills, and far beyond them. It is not a dramatic cover-up. It is not a bonfire in the county yard. It is a quiet subtraction. The event is allowed to leave a faint shadow in the paperwork, an index number, a requisition slip, a single line in a ledger nobody thought to scrub, while the substance itself, the thing that actually tells you what happened, is lifted clean out and never seen by anyone again. You are left holding 2 things at once: proof that something real was recorded, and proof that you are not permitted to read it. And Warren's case is not the only one on that ridge. Pull the county index for the whole of the 1950s and 60s and you will find at least 9 entries just like his. A number, a date, a single line describing an incident, missing persons logged and then unlogged, a veterinary report on an entire herd that died in one night, a schoolteacher's written complaint about a child who came back from a weekend at his grandparents' unable to remember the family dog he had grown up with. Every one of them assigned a clean number. Every one of them followed, within a month or 2, by an empty drawer. The numbers run in a tidy, unbroken sequence. The documents behind them are simply not there. Somebody did not just erase Elias Warren. Somebody had been keeping that ledger clean for a very long time, one careful subtraction at a time, and Warren was only the man who finally forced them to do it in a hurry. Before we move on to what he told the sheriff, stop for a second. What you just heard about the vanishing of the report is the part that changes everything, but it only makes sense when you see it written out next to the ranger's own logbook. The 11 days, the empty cage. It is all in the document link below. Take 5 seconds right now, grab it, and then come back. because what comes next builds directly on it. The link is in the description. QR code is on your screen. So what did Elias Warren actually tell the sheriff? On the third day of the captivity, the county sheriff, a man named Odell Pruitt, whose own family the hollow itself had been named after generations back, drove out to the station through the rain. He did not file a report of his own. He was careful that way. But his widow gave a single long interview to a regional folklorist in 1988, 20 years on, and in it she repeated word for word what her husband had come home and told her that night, sitting at the kitchen table, white in the face, and unable to eat his supper. She said the sheriff told her the ranger had been talking to the thing in the cage for 3 straight days, and that the thing had been talking right back to him. According to what Warren told the sheriff, the creature did not beg, and it did not threaten, it bargained. It told Warren, in a calm and reasonable voice, that it had warned many people in that county over many years, and that it remembered every one of them completely, and that it could give those memories back if he wanted them. It told him the location of 2 people who had gone missing from the hollow back in the 1950s, cold cases that were still sitting open in a drawer. And Warren, God help him, when he went and checked one of those locations, found exactly what the thing had described. That is the detail that breaks people when they first hear it. Warren drove out to the spot the creature named a dry cave sitting high above a bend in the river, and inside it he found human remains that matched a boy who had vanished walking home from a church social in 1953. A closed and locked cage. A creature that had been sitting in a steel trap the entire time it spoke. And it knew, precisely, where a 20-year-old body had been hidden in a cave no living person had walked into. The sheriff's widow said her husband had exactly one question after Warren showed him those remains, and it was not a question about the monster at all, it was about who else had known. Because if the thing in the cage was telling the truth, and the bones in the cave said that it was, then it had been living inside that community, wearing the borrowed faces of the missing for at least 2 full decades. And in all that time, nobody had ever reported those missing people as strange. The families had simply, quietly, stopped mentioning their names, as though they had all been told to, as though a price had been agreed. That is the part that turns an old folk tale into something genuinely cold. The skin changer of the Ozarks was not hiding from the community up in some cave. It was being tolerated by it. Somewhere, at some point, someone in that hollow had made an arrangement with the thing on the ridge, and the currency of that arrangement, the thing that kept it running smoothly for 20 years, was silence. You do not report what comes home wearing the wrong walk. You set an extra plate, and you look away, and the deaths in your family do not come. The old woman who finally broke that silence in the 80s put it plainly to the folklorist. Everybody knew, she said. Everybody had always known. You just learned young that you did not say the name of anyone who came home wrong, and you did not ask why the plate at the end of the table stayed set year after year. It was not a secret, the way she told it. It was a manner. It was simply how you were raised in that hollow, and nobody thought to question a thing they had been doing since before they could walk. Warren understood the shape of all of it by the 7th day, and it is right at that point, according to both deputies, that he stopped trying to hand the creature over to the state specialist and started, quietly, trying to destroy it himself. He was too late. On the night of the 11th day, Deputy Rayburn was on watch alone in the front office. Warren was back in the rear room with the cage, the same room he had insisted on from the beginning, windowless. One door, a room he had personally asked to be locked from the outside, with himself sealed inside it alongside the thing. Rayburn said the talking through the wall went on well past midnight, 2 distinct voices at first, then, slowly, only one voice, and then, a little before 3 in the morning, nothing at all. When they finally unlocked and opened that door at first light, the cage was standing open and completely empty. There was no sign of forced exit anywhere in the room. The outer lock had been engaged the entire night, and Rayburn had never left his chair. And Elias Warren was gone, not dead on the floor, not slipped out through a window. There was no window to slip out of. Simply not there, inside a sealed room that a sober deputy had guarded without blinking for 6 hours straight. The only thing left behind in that room was Warren's logbook, lying open on the concrete floor, turned to a final entry written in his same careful, unhurried hand. 3 words: "It knows me." Within 7 days of that morning, the report was gone from the county files, as we have covered. Within a single month, both deputies had been quietly reassigned to different counties on the far side of the state. And within a year, the Pruitt Hollow Ranger Station itself was decommissioned, boarded, and the access road left to wash out in the spring floods until it stopped appearing on the Forest Service maps altogether. You can still find the older maps if you know where to look. The station sits right there on them, clearly marked. On every map printed after 1974, that entire spur of the ridge is simply blank, marked as if nothing had ever been built out there at all. And this is where the story stops being about one vanished ranger and starts being about a method. Because the erasure of Elias Warren follows a pattern you can trace across the whole region once someone points it out to you, and after that you genuinely cannot stop seeing it. A strange event gets recorded by a careful, credible, sober person. The record enters an official system with a number attached, and then the record, and very often the person who made it, is quietly removed, while the ledger is left holding just enough of a scar to prove the wound was once there. The families of the Hollow did not speak about Elias Warren for an entire generation. When they finally did, in scattered interviews through the 1980s and 90s, they did not describe a hero, and they did not describe a madman. They described something much stranger and much quieter. They said that after Warren disappeared into that locked room, the deaths simply stopped. The livestock stopped dying bloodless in the fields. Nobody came back through the door wearing the wrong walk. For almost 20 solid years, the Hollow was ordinary and quiet and safe, in a way the old people said it had not been in their entire lives. And then, in the early 2000s, an elderly woman down in the valley told a visiting researcher that it had started again. Someone in her own family had come back through the door looking exactly right and moving exactly wrong. The dogs had backed into the corner, and when she tried to report it to the county, she found something that frightened her more than the thing in her kitchen. She found that the county had no ranger station recorded on that ridge, no file for any man named Elias Warren, no open case for anyone under the name she gave them. The entire system had no memory whatsoever of the thing that had once very nearly caught it. Which brings us to the question this whole story has really been about from the start. When a record can be removed cleanly enough that even the people who lived through it cannot prove that it happened, how much of the history you have been handed is the shadow left in the ledger? And how much is the real thing, quietly lifted out and gone? Elias Warren caught the skin changer of the Ozarks alive. He learned that it had been wearing his own neighbours for 20 years with the community's silent permission. He found a body it could not possibly have known about. He wrote 3 final words in a locked and windowless room. And then he was subtracted from the record so completely that a woman 2 generations later could stand in the exact valley where it all happened, describe the exact same thing at her own door, and be told, in total and honest sincerity, that none of it had ever been real. The cage was empty by morning. The report was gone by the following week. And the only thing anyone can still say for certain is that whatever Elias Warren caught out on that ridge, it did not stay caught. It simply waited for the record to be made clean. And out on that ridge, the record always gets made clean, right in the end. If this is the kind of history that the maps and the files and the clean drawers were built to make you forget, then you already know what to do next. The full reconstruction, the names, the dates, the coordinates, the account word for word, all of it, is sitting in the document linked below. Go read it now, before it becomes just another empty drawer, with a number on the front and absolutely nothing left inside.